As we've been asked, I'd like to pay tribute to a book by my colleagues. There are many, of course, wonderful Douglas publications, books, biographical treatments, but just in case some of you don't have it already, I want to especially pay tribute to the book Picturing Frederick Douglass. Here it is in all its glory. Edited by John Stauffer, Zoe Trodd, and Celeste-Marie, all good friends of mine. John and Celeste and Zoe were the intrepid researchers and collectors and editors of this quite extraordinary volume. The only other volume I think anyone can compare it to are some of the pictorial histories of Abraham Lincoln. But in this book, we are treated to first Douglas's own 3 essays on photography, or kind of philosophical speeches and essays that he did in the 1860s during the war years on this new technology of photography, which he was both fascinated with and he learned to master as a subject of it. But the book especially collects the more than 162 extant photographs of Douglas. Now, I may have that number wrong, and actually now I think it's more like 164 or 165 probably extant photographs of Douglas. But our friends Stauffer, Trodd, and Bernier went and found these images all over the United States and collected them in one place. And I cannot tell you how many times I would like to show you my underlinings, my post-its, and my bookmarks, if I could, how often I referred to this book, used this book, in deciding myself how to illustrate my biography of Douglas. My publisher, Simon & Schuster, allowed me 80-some illustrations in that biography. And if any of you have it and want to thumb through it, you'll note that I've used many images of Douglas, from the earliest to the latest. And they also allowed me in that book front paper and back papers, as they sometimes call them, an opening page that has a fairly early image of Douglas, and then a final back page, which shows this incredible, famous 1894 image of Douglas, I believe the last photograph, or last major photograph of his life. I just want to say that we are all in debt to John, Celeste, and Zoe for creating this magnificent collection of Douglas images, which, by the way, also include murals and cartoons of and about Douglas over the years in the 20th century. It is a pictorial study of Douglas and of the ways Douglas himself used this new art and this new 19th century technology of photography. And indeed, he may be, as the editors showed us, the most photographed American of the 19th century. It's a book that we will all cherish for all time. Thank you to John, Celeste, and Zoe for this great volume, the book Picturing Frederick Douglass. And thank you to all of you, and I look forward to being with you again for the lecture I'll deliver on the 25th of September. Thanks.
It is a precious gift and a wonderful privilege to talk today about the trailblazing and powerful book by John Stauffer and Henry Louis Gates Jr., The Portable Frederick Douglass. This anthology is revolutionary, it's transformative, and it's a key weapon in the social justice arsenal. It's a volume that speaks to all aspects of Douglas's power as an orator, Douglas's power as a philosopher, Douglas's power as a revolutionary freedom fighter, Frederick Douglass's power as a thinker, as an intellectual, as a historian, and as a revolutionary committed to the word as weapon in all its forms. There are so many aspects of this powerful book to speak about, but perhaps the one to carry in our hearts, to carry in our minds, to carry in our memories, to carry in our own social justice kits of revolution for today is one of the powerful things that John Stauffer and Henry Louis Gates Jr. say in their beautiful introduction. True art was for Douglass a language. True art expressed the essential humanity of all people. And what is so staggeringly powerful and transformatively wonderful about their volume is they speak to Douglas's writings across every word, every format, and every social justice vision that he lived through during his life. In this collection, you'll find his journalism, his autobiographies, his speeches, and you'll especially find his writings on Toussaint Louverture, revolutionary Black heroic liberator who freed and liberated, as Mr. Douglas said, a new generation. Toussaint Louverture, for Frederick Douglass, was an inspirational figure. And as Douglas himself writes in this powerful anthology and in the material that their authors include here, he says, Toussaint Louverture stands alone as a liberator, warrior, and statesman. He came to us from the hell of slavery. And what is so powerful about this anthology and this scholarly edition and its beautiful introduction and its beautiful collection of Douglas's visionary writings is that it does justice to words as weapons, words as social justice liberation, and it does very much a powerful way of thinking about Douglas's conviction that art wasn't as or like liberation. So his commitment to photography, and as he stands before and behind me here, he himself believed in picture making as a power. So for Frederick Douglass, the virtuosic power of the word, Douglass himself saw language as cold, valueless, and lifeless when it came to doing justice to the hell of slavery. As an antidote, he turned to images, pictures as a power, and pictures as transformation. And for Frederick Douglass, art wasn't as or like, but art is liberation. And what we see in this powerful anthology is both Stauffer and Gates Jr. do powerful justice to art and philosophy as activism for liberation in the movements for the freedom struggle for African diasporic peoples across the world, past, present, and future. It should all be in all of our revolutionary toolkits.
Okay, I was asked to review David Blight's biography of Frederick Douglass, and I'm happy to do so. I've written on it, and it's, in my view, the preeminent biography of Frederick Douglass. Blight captures Douglass in his multiple dimensions. When Douglass died in 1895, Chicago Tribune, which was essentially a white paper, said that no man, white or black, had been better known for nearly half a century in this country as Frederick Douglass, and that he was so esteemed by whites as well as blacks that his entrance into their midst upon any public occasion was always the signal for an enthusiastic personal greeting. And that quote from the Tribune captures his significance. He was one, he said he was essentially that, if not the leading public figure, certainly one of them. And Professor Blight highlights how and why that was. This was this was written during the period of Jim Crow, and so the biography really captures the significance of Douglass as a public person in a way that no other book has, and he highlights the power, the brilliance, the subtlety, the pervasiveness of his oratory, and it was the golden age of oratory, and how and why that was so significant, and why it was a central part of the nation at the time. And before the biography, no one had really captured in the way that Professor Blight does the public significance of Frederick Douglass. Blight estimates that more Americans heard Douglass speak than any other public figure of his time, with the possible exception of Mark Twain. And everyone knows who Twain is. And Douglass, before Professor Blight's book, was well known, certainly among scholars and among intellectuals and among people interested in race and African American culture, but not read, not well known by a lot of other people. The biography is multidimensional. One of the many aspects that Blight highlights is he brings to life Douglass's private life, and he highlights the contrast between the public and the private life. He shows how Douglass had, because of stress from work and various reasons, he had two nearly, if not nearly, possibly actual emotional breakdowns, which really hadn't been addressed before. He also captures Douglass's brilliance as a writer and a speaker. In his 3 autobiographies and in his speeches. And the title of the book, The Prophet of Freedom, he also shows how Douglass's understanding of prophecy, Douglass's religiosity, the way in which Douglass cut his eye teeth on the King James Bible, and that contributed greatly to his brilliance, his power, his eloquence as a speaker and as a writer. He also shows how Douglass is, really the preeminent kind of self-made man, and meaning that he continually evolved from slave to free man to Garrisonian abolitionist, and how Douglass was, in a sense, infinitely curious, had a great understanding of the political and cultural moment in which he was living. And so who Douglass was in 1845 was very different than who he was in 1855, which is very different than who he was during the Civil War, and very different who he was after the war. And he also highlights the contrast between Douglass's private and public lives. And probably one of the through lines is in the biography is the way in which Douglass used prophecy, divinely inspired language based on his deep reading in Scripture, especially the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. Those books of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, were ones that Douglass knew better than the New Testament, or at least quoted from, paraphrased from, was inspired by. And he rooted his own story, and especially the story of African Americans, in the Hebrew prophets, as Professor Blight notes. And one of the other aspects of this long biography, in my mind, is the narrative flow. It's a book that encourages the way in which Blight writes it. It encourages one to keep reading. It's dramatic. He writes, his prose is magnificent, and he writes in a way that wants the reader, encourages the reader not to put the book down. And it's very easy in long books to put it down and to stop reading or to pick and choose. And this is a book that deserves to be read start to finish. And the benefits of doing so and the rewards of doing so are emotionally, intellectually, extremely beneficial and rewarding. And so he won numerous awards, which deservedly so. And it's a book that I think every American needs to read. If every American did read the book, the United States would be a better place.